All right, so before we get started today, I want to go over a few of these vocabulary words that we saw in the focus question. 2.1 today is going to be about renting bicycles. The tour operators decide to rent bicycles for their customers. They get information from two bike shops, Rocky's Cycle Center, and they send a table of rental fees for bikes. Adrian's bike shop sends a graph of their rental prices. The number of bikes rented is called the independent variable. The rental cost is called the dependent variable. Because the rental cost depends on the number of bikes rented. So depending on how many bikes they decide to rent, that tells us how much it's going to cost. And one way that we think about this is looking at these two people down here and thinking about how the person who is leaning on this other person is dependent on this person. If this person were to move, the person who's leaning on them is kind of in for a rough go. If they move away, this person is going to fall because they're depending on this person. But if this person were to move, this person isn't affected at all. They're just standing upright because they are independent. Okay, so this person is, independent, and this person is dependent. Again, this person is dependent because if they were to be leaning up against the independent person and they move, this person would fall. So they are depending on the other person. Okay? So now we are going to use this information to help us with our classwork today. So on your lab sheet, we provided you with Adrian's graph right here. And then we also provided you with Rocky's table. So what we want you to do is we want you to complete a table for Adrian, and right on this graph for Adrian, we want you to graph for Rocky's. This way we'll have both a table and a graph for Adrian and Rocky's bike rental, and we can compare those two companies a little bit easier. Okay? Now, typically, the independent variable, the one that stands upright and all alone, is on the x-axis. And the dependent variable, the one who depends on the other one, the leaning guy, is on the y-axis. Okay? So in this case, the number of bikes is the independent variable because they get to stand alone and they get to stand upright. And depending on however many number of bikes the people buy, that tells us how much it's going to cost. So the dependent variable is the rental fee or the cost. So make sure that you get this written on your lab sheet also. And then your next step is going to be to complete Adrian's graph. To complete Adrian's table. And you have to use these points on the graph to help you with his table. And then you also need to complete Rocky's graph. So you'll look at the amounts and the table that we provided you for Rocky, and you'll have to start plotting these points on the graph. Okay? So I'm going to do a few of these with you, and then you're going to complete the rest on your own. All right? So I'm going to use a different color just so we can see it a little bit easier for Rocky on the graph. So I see that at 5 bikes, it costs $400. So I know that 5 is going to be right in between 0 and 10. And at 5 bikes for Rocky, it's going to cost $400. So we're going to pop up there. Okay. Now at 10 bikes, it is going to cost $535. So I need to find where that would be on my graph. I know right in between 400 and 800 is going to be 600. So somewhere in this area is going to be 583. Okay. At 15 bikes, it's going to cost $655. So here is where 15 bikes would be. And now I know it's going to be just a little bit above this line because that's where 600 is. And I'm going to keep going, okay? Now, if I were to be completing Adrian's table down here, I have to use the graph and I have to use these points on Adrian's graph to help me. So I need to find where 5 bikes is on the graph. So here's where he is at for 5 bikes. We're in between 0 and 400, right on that line. So I know that means we're at $200. So with 5 bikes at Adrian's bike rental, it's going to be $200. At 10 bikes, I'm right in between 200 and 400, so that's going to be $300. At 15, I'm just above $400, so I'm going to write $450. All right, now you will continue with Adrian's table and Rocky's graph.